right. So an official welcome to those of you just joining, and welcome back to those of you who are continuing on. And thank you to those who've been joining all 3 days of the Open Future Forum. We are on day 3. Our day 1 was civic infrastructure. Our day 2 was the regenerative ag and hunger and food systems. And today our theme is around eco-restoration, climate action, stewardship, co-liberation, many of conversations today that we'll be having. And we're so honored to have you here. It's been incredible. I'll acknowledge, I think Katie yesterday gave the stats that we've had, and that was yesterday. We had 22 countries represented and upwards of 300 or so people who've attended the various sessions. We'll be doing the recordings, obviously, and a ton of follow-up after this, but it's been deeper than I expected in some ways. It's been broader, so much ground covered, so much incredible work in territories and project examples and conversations, but it's also been deeper. And I'll just say that the quality of being and the way that people have shown up together in radical authenticity and a willingness to put our hearts on the line. It's not just about what are we doing and the hats we wear and the titles we hold. It's so much more about who we are at this time and how we're showing up to try to solve together and move through these differences to become radical collaborators and cooperators for the sake of the planet, for the future, and honestly for our own nobility, for our own humanness together. So I won't go too much down that road other than to say the quality of being has been tremendous. And I'm very happy to also look at what are we doing. And there's so many things happening that this particular session is really full. And I had more that we didn't sort of bring in. So we'll be hearing from a lot of projects today, sharing demonstrations of eco-restoration and earth repair. I am going to ask presenters to try to keep it to about 5 to 7 minutes so we make sure to hear from everybody today. I think we have about 14 panelists. And before we do kick that off, I did want to thank our co-convening partners. We've only been able to pull this tremendous effort off with a lot of support and help and outreach and participation from our co-conveners. So I do want to thank the American Sustainable Business Network, Bluefin Investment, Ecorestoration Alliance, which has been a particular co-convener for this day, El Puente, Global Unity, Guild of Future Architects, Heartland P5, Imagine World, Institute of Ecotechnics, who'll be presenting some of their projects here today, Intergen Family, Kinship Earth, the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, Partnerships for Change, Pro-Social World, Reconsider, Toxic Free Futures for Our Children, Treeangle Foundation, and United Refuge. And to everybody who's contributed and participated, we acknowledge and honor you. And thank you so much for being here. With that, today, we have a full roster, as I said, and I'm very excited to get to it. I'm going to go ahead and call upon, I have a bit of an order, some requests for when to go in the order of things. So I'm going to call upon various presenters, but please do have an active chat. We appreciate questions, comments, links, resources. Keep the chat lively. And I'm going to hand our first presentation off to Mark Nelson, Meridel, Rubenstein, and David Tocchetto with the Eden and Iraq project, which is sponsored by our friends at the Institute of Ecotechnics. So Meridel, I'll let you kick that off and you can hand that to the rest of your team. And thank you so much for being here.
Okay, great. I'm sharing the screen. Everybody, can you, oh, I have to get it way back. Oh my God. Hold on. Here. Hi, Jamaica. Thank you for having us. This is absolutely thrilling. And thank you, everybody, for being here and with your amazing projects. We just wish you all the joy and success humanly possible. So I'm project director of the Eden and Iraq Wastewater Project, which I share with, also directing with Dr. Davide Tocchetto from Italy and originating with Dr. Mark Nelson from Ecotechnics. And so we have two right here. You see a little insert of our one of our garden design in the Mesopotamian marshes of southern Iraq, and underneath it you see our two sponsors, Nature Iraq, the renowned environmental NGO in Iraq, and then Mark Nelson directs the Institute of Ecotechnics, and they are our umbrella fiscal sponsor and dear supporters. And just to just start this off, and then Mark will continue, just to show you marshes as they looked in 1977 in the top, where people lived on floating islands in this beautiful reed architecture. And then at below, and when we first went in 2011, you can see the marshes drained and destroyed by Saddam Hussein, who drained the marshes in the late 90s to Panashir rebels hiding there. So all that is left, you see on the ground, if you can see it, are bullet shells and seashells. And so here people started to return in 2003 when Saddam Hussein was deposed, store their land. And for us, they've been a beacon of hope to the millions of political and environmental refugees abroad currently uprooted. And Nature Rock is at the forefront of restoring this whole effort. And so here, just to show you them up close, the Marsh Arabs, they've lived sustainably with the resources of the marshes for almost 10,000 years with their beautiful architecture. And you can see in the middle down below, it's the ziggurat of Ur down the street, down the road from us, which is also where Prophet Abraham was born. So we're in the cradle of civilization. And here up close, the reed architecture, which has been a model for Islamic design that followed many, 1,500 years later. And we're using this design for the shade structures and towers and fences and everything in our garden. So here I'm going to turn this over to Mark just to continue and to talk. Are you here, Mark? Uh-oh.
I am here indeed.
Okay, cool. Well, I can move the slides for you if you want.
I do. I think you have to.
Okay.
Anyway, quite briefly, wastewater gardens are a type of constructed wetlands. And I fell in love with this when I was locked up for 2 years in Biosphere 2, because that's how we recycled our sewage and fed the nutrients to our productive farm. And it's a very simple technology. There's a primary treatment where we settle solids, then the constructed wetland itself. And if you've heard the term reed beds, this is not a reed bed. We've decided that we're making beautiful, ecologically vibrant and productive wetlands. So we put in and we've experimented with many, many plants and shown them that they can survive in a constructed wetland. The beauty about the Eden in Iraq project, and the original initiator was Meridel, is it's not just a constructed wetland project. This is a tribute to the Marsh Arab culture. We are meeting a severe need, and the bottom image is a traditional wedding blanket that Marsh Arab women would weave, when they become betrothed. And we've kind of patterned the garden to look like that. These are some images of the project yet to be realized. We're in an intense fundraising phase of the project. We brought on Blue Tech Research, who are managing a lot of our impact and media presentations, and they're innovators in the water industry, so they're really great partners. And so we're going to be making sewage into flowers, and that was kind of the motto. Wastewater gardens have been around for about 25 years now, and we've worked in 14 countries with whatever the local climate dictates the plants. But we're going to make a tribute to the Middle Eastern culture and include as many biblical and Quranic mentioned plants as possible. Next slide.
I'm going to show you, yeah.
Yeah, and then, briefly, and I think we're doing okay on our 7 minutes. The wonderful thing about constructed wetlands is, and I've seen this all over the world. So I wasn't surprised when Meridel and I made the first trip and began building, and we had great ground truth and ground support at the local community, at the town councils, at the provincial government and the national government, because the sorry truth is that there's virtually no sewage treatment in the country. And that, of course, leads to incredible problems with health because it's impacting the drinking water. So on 6.5 acres, we're going to be able to build a wetland that will treat the waste of 10,000 people. And right now, there isn't sewage treatment. They collect the sewage and literally pump it into the marshes and the Euphrates River that runs by the city where our first project is going to be. So it's going to be a great demonstration, and we've already gotten tremendous interest in replicating this throughout Iraq and in similar arid regions. And in the developing world, this is like someone was mentioning the elephant in the room about the Amazon. Well, the elephant in the room about death and water quality is that most of the world outside of wealthy countries do not have sewage treatment. And that leads to the contamination of drinking water, which leads to diarrhea, cholera, typhus, a whole host of problems, and it degrades the environment by dumping excess nutrients in it. In this situation, as Meridel said, our inspiration is the marsh Arab culture, which is probably the most sustainable culture ever in the planet. The same structures that we're seeing and admiring were in Babylonia, dating back 5, 8, 9,000 years. And they have worked, how to live in the marshes with their water buffalo. And so protecting those marshes is super important for climate change. This was once the 4th largest wetlands in the world. And currently, let's not overlook, there are tremendous threats. Upstream countries are damming and using water, much less is being allowed to flow in the Euphrates coming down here. There's salinity problems, economic problems, etc. But we're hoping to make a real showpiece of an alternative.
Here we go. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I just want to note the beauty making as well. And that's something we've talked about before when you shared the presentation, is that it's about transforming something that may be seen as a waste and turning it into beauty and turning it into value. And I just think there's so much. I'm very excited about your project and really appreciate you sharing it with us here today. I know there's so much more to go, but please put any links in the chat and resources to your work so people can find out more about what you're up to. I know there's a lot of people interested in the model that you're working through. So thank you.
There's a number of websites, and our motto is give us some shit and we'll produce fruit and flowers and beauty.
And beauty. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mark and Meridel. I know how busy you both are, and I appreciate you being here. And thank you to the Institute of Ecotechnics for supporting this incredible project. I am going to pass that on. I think, John, you said you want to go after. So why don't we hand that to our friend Minni Jain with the Flow Partnership? I think it's interesting because it's got a complementary tenor to this particular project. So Minni, I'd love for you to share. And then John, if you're ready, then I'll have you go next. Minni, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. That was so beautiful to the eyes to see what is happening, and that, keeping in mind the marsh Arab culture and those, how the designs pervade every aspect of life, whether they are rugs or their water designs or their wetlands. That theme ran through the entire life. And so water is a huge part of it. And I run a charity, water charity in the UK called the Flow Partnership. And just before I go, Jamaica, please do stop me as soon as my 5 minutes are up, and I'll make sure I'll wrap up very quickly. So we work all over the world, but the project I want to show you today is something we've done not very long back, just at the start of the pandemic. And it's a project in India, and a lot of our work has been inspired by a wonderful waterman in India called Rajendra Singh. And this project was done in a very remote part of India called Karoli in Rajasthan. Let me quickly share my screen. Here we go. Can everybody see my,
Yeah.
Can you see my screen? Yes?
Do you want to put it in present mode so it's a little bit bigger?
I will put it in present mode, yes.
Thank you, dear.
So here we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we started, when I started talking to Rajendra Singh, who's the waterman of India, this is what we were talking about. What is the vision we want for our planet? We want a healthy ecosystems, mountains, flowing rivers, free-flowing rivers, and everything as it should be in the landscape for communities to thrive and live in the lands that they are. And often we forget that, man did not weave the web of life. We are just a strand in it. it. And whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. So look at this example. This is really the start of that project. This is a place called Karoli in Rajasthan. And this is how dry it was. And this is also post the work that we did over there. So you can see what we can do in desertification and what we can do to revive that. So I won't go through all this. It's all about the water cycle. This is something we all know, and what it leads to: hunger and migration, distress migration, etc. So this particular project, it was in Maharashtra, and you can see from this map, Maharashtra is a small little village in Karoli district, which is in the backyards of Rajasthan in India, which is a very, very dry state. And 100% of the people over there are considered to be living below the poverty line. So this is an image of that, what kind of situation there was in that area, and how slowly they'd become drier and drier and drier. And this was the water course. This was the state of the water course. This is a drone image taken in February of 2019. And this is a close-up shot. And this is, at that point, the community knew they had to do something. And a lot of our work was talking with the communities and getting to them and asking them, look, this is the problem. How is it that we can do something together? What is it that you know? What is it that you can do with us? So the whole process is a community-driven process. It's not us coming in and telling them, hey, listen, you can do this. This is something communities know. They've lived in desert areas or those kind of regions for ages, for years, for decades, for centuries. And they had a traditional wisdom of holding water during the monsoon time, which is 4 months roughly about in India. 4 to 5 months, and you collect all your water and during those months. And if you don't collect your water during those months, you get dry water courses like that. So those are the kind of stories we were discussing with the communities, that why did you allow yourself to reach that state? That's a lovely picture of Rajendra. This is just at the start of the project, talking with the women of the village, and we were all saying that this is something we have to do together. And until they agreed to do it together with us, we didn't start the project. And that's the way we go with all the projects in different parts of the world. So they said, without water, we have nothing. A lot of, during that time, COVID was beginning, and a lot of migrants made it back to the village. And what would they find in the village? Again, there wasn't enough food for them. How do they change that? That's that kind of apathy and that kind of misery that also comes from not having enough water. These are farmers. You want them to be farmers. You don't want them to go to cities and become laborers. If they had water, they would be very successful farmers. So that kind of depression that sets in is what is the first step. You have to get them thinking they know what to do. Just enable them to think they can take a step. So when they said yes, and that's a lovely picture of all of them signing, yes, we will work together. A third of the, we will manage the project, and this is what we're going to do. Can you arrange this with us? We'll give labor, we'll give tractors, we'll give in the time. And that's what happened. So these are just images from them bringing, managing the whole project, looking at where they're going to dig the pond, where they're going to build the intervention in the landscape that will hold the water, and how who needs to, which tractor will take away the soil from the thing, where will they put it, which farm they'll put it in. So that entire management of the project is done by them. And you can see these images slowly it's beginning to take shape there. All these tractors belong to the farmers over there, and you see how dry that land is. How dry! Look at the soil. It's brown. There's no greenery over there. I put this image in because on the left is Chaman Singh. He's Rajendra's brother, but he also manages the whole project on the ground. There's very little about construction of water or where the water is held that he doesn't know. And on the right is the head man of the village, who was managing the actual logistics of the project. So the two of them were actually making sure that the project was working in collaboration and that they were doing what needed to be done at the right time. So the other decision that you make is, okay, once you've held the water, what if there's too much water? Is there an outlet for it? So this is the outlet that they're building. And where does the outlet water go? So the outlet water usually then connects to the local stream, and slowly over a period of time, with work that has been done before, we've seen that when you build these kind of interventions in the landscape and hold the water in staggered cascades, what happens then is that the underground aquifer gets recharged, and then whatever is excess which comes out from outlets like this becomes a perennial river, and the river comes back to life. So this was the construction you can see they did, and over here, this is the structure that they built. Now these structures, here it's a straight line, it depends on the geography. It can be a half moon structure, it can be a square structure. These are called johats. And johats are very traditional structures in Rajasthan. Almost everybody in Rajasthan would know what these structures were for, and villages would do them. And there would be, when they'd they'd clean the structures and build the structures, then they'd paint them, and the most beautiful images would come over. They'd have elephants or camels, the animals from the area, and when the rains would come, in the olden times, and the water would fill up. And if the water reached the feet of the camel or the elephant that was painted on the johad, there'd be a great celebration, because then they knew they had enough water to last the whole year. So with pond construction, look at this, 6 months later. So this earlier image that you saw was from the drone shot was 2019, and this image is from August 2019. So look at that magic, that transformation that happens in 6 months. Literally, this is so simple, holding the water where it falls, and then you have ample water. There are 22 wells in the village. They are now full of water. Okay, they don't need to migrate. They don't need to go to the cities. What is the need? They've got vegetation, they've got crops, they've got animals, they've got ample water. Women have water right next door to their homes, even if they don't have taps. This is how village life is. And you can see the scenery has changed in 6 months, from that devastation to this lush, green, beautiful farms, and farmers have time to sit and admire their handiwork. The local incomes increased, girl children started going to school, youth started, from the buffaloes, the milk started being sold, the women had more time. Some of the women were able to actually apply for, cooking stoves at home rather than foraging wood fuel. So the whole action revolved around bringing the water back by the community in with what they knew, the traditional systems that they knew. And we say in our work at the Flow Partnership, we work with communities across the world, whether it's India or Africa or Colombia or the UK, whether they're flooded or they're facing drought, that we have to work with the communities. We have to talk about these issues. Water is such a huge problem today. You can see the droughts that have happened across the world, and we have to increase that action on the ground. And on the ground are the communities. So we can together go from that to this to this. And this is a close-up of the thing. So I'll end over here. And thank you very much.
Oh, Minni, so much. Leave that one on for a minute so people can track.
Yeah, I'll put it back again.
Yeah, put the resources into the chat. I just want to say I feel an awareness of the richness of these projects and how stunning it is to see that transformation. And I don't want to go so fast that we bypass the enormity of what you're showing. And I also appreciate the conscientiousness of time. So Minni, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. If you would put that information in the chat, I know there's probably several people who would really like to learn more about your work. And you also have a water school, which I think is very important, as you guys are doing a lot of education about water and about how we work with water as water. And so I really want to make sure people find out about your work with that as well. Thank you so much, Minni. It's just incredible to see that quick transformation when we give the earth a break and allow for the natural processes to return. It's just stunning and inspiring. With that, I will go ahead and move on. And I think for presenters, what I'll do is just sort of, I hate the interruption. I'll give you a little 1 minute. You'll hear me say that somewhere in there, and I'll put that in the chat as well, just so we're tracking good time. But appreciate each of you for sharing so far. And I think with that, Jean-Lou, if you're ready, I'd love to have you jump in with ecosystem restoration camps and all the incredible work that you've been doing. You're really a legacy holder of so much of this work, and really excited to hear about what you'd like to share today. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you. I've started a timer. So, yes, the ecosystem restoration camps movement is something that started when I had dreams, and the dreams would not get out of my head, and I thought to myself, I'm such a dreamer. My father told me, why don't you get a job, that kind of stuff. And but I couldn't get them out of my mind. So I wrote an essay called Earth Restoration Peace Camps. It was in Permaculture magazine. If you want to read it, it's still up online. And then tens of thousands of people started saying that's what we want. So then we had to start the ecosystem restoration camps movement. And I can tell you that now, after 6 years, there are 55 camps in 6 continents around the world. So it's not culturally specific. People all over the world are ready to restore the earth. I think we need to realize that probably the only agency that has the ability to do this is humanity, and that the kind of institutions which are based on self-interest or limited interests, vested interests, are not going to be able to do this. Humanity needs to act as a species on a planetary scale. I'm going to share the screen, if I might, and just show you the website. Here it is. Feel free to go to the website. We hope you'll all become members. If we got to, the way we started was everyone shared 10 euros per month, which is 120 euros per year. If we got to 1 million supporting members, that would be 120 million euros per year, which would probably propel this to, hundreds or thousands of camps. So my dreams have evolved further now, and I've been thinking about what is the next things that are needed. And I notice that we've all endured this pandemic, that there's war taking place, that many things are still not functional. And I think the best case for humanity is to realize that we can do this. We know that it's possible to restore large-scale degraded ecosystems. We know that people are willing to do it. And we have to think about a little bit about what's stopping us from doing this all over the world right now. And I would say that also we need to realize that it could get worse before it gets better. So what I've been recommending, what I've been dreaming about now, is central kitchens, creator spaces, and cultural stages. And that if all ecosystem restoration camps and all eco-villages and all communities around the world have central kitchens, creator spaces, and cultural stages, then every day is a festival, and there's food for everyone. No one can go hungry, and we can employ people in growing food. We can employ people in processing food so that any surplus is prepared for a rainy day, as it were. And in cultural stages, we can pass on knowledge and wisdom and joy from one generation to the next. So I think that these, when I realized that actually dreams can come true, that it's possible to dream and then define and reinforce and communicate about it and amplify the concept, and then it can become manifest. And I think the other thing that I've been thinking about, I've gotten very philosophical. I turned 70 recently, and so I'm really thinking about how change takes place. I'm thinking a lot about mortality, and I think that we're actually all spiritual beings having a momentary experience as human beings, and that we should stop thinking that we're human beings seeking to understand spirituality. We are spiritual beings who are here for a short while and will be passing on. And in understanding this, we have to realize that this is the true power, this is the true energy, because this is life's force, this is chi. And if we bring together critical masses of human beings who have a shared intention, then it's impossible for us to be stopped. And so we have to learn how to collaborate and not how to compete. And we need to look at the things which are fundamentally wrong with the existing systems. I think if I look at it, I would say that the whole concept of materialism is basically saying that what human beings make is more valuable than nature, more valuable than life itself, and that this is patently false. There is no possibility that this is correct. And so this should not be the basis of the economy. This should not be the basis of society. We should not be having just transactional relationships with one another. We should be having deep symbiotic relationships because we're all actually relatives. And so as I see this and I think about the growth of the camps movement, all the camps are autonomous, self-organizing, and self-governing. And it's simply a network that's keeping them together. You don't even need to join these up if you don't want to, but I think it's probably more valuable to work as a network. And there are great camps all over the place. We're having some results in Somalia, Syria. We're getting larger camps going in different places. They're in all continents. I hope you'll learn more about it, and we'll have another chance to talk some other time. I'll stick around and see what we can do. And now my time is up.
Brilliant, John. You made such well use of your time, and thank you so much for this incredibly important reminder that this is a symbiotic relationship, a co-creative dance with a very much living earth, and that we are passing through. And so the beauty that we make is everything. As we kind of glide along on this continuum, I think it's really powerful to recognize that we can make beauty, and that's one of the most incredible acts, and that we can be a restorer species instead of a destroyer species. Thank you so much for all your incredible work, John, and for helping ignite all these people of place to jump in and get their hands dirty and have the great joy of being in a communion and a relationship of reciprocity with the earth. You're providing people an opportunity to remember we can be in communion, and that's something I think we deeply long for. So appreciate you so much, John. Thanks for being here and sharing. You can see John's information in the chat. And I'd love to hand that next to Atossa Sultani with the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Initiative. Thanks, Atossa. You've been here all morning for a few of the sessions. We're looking forward to hearing about your work as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamaica. Incredible group, and so inspiring to hear all of the different projects. So my journey has been that I've been working in the Amazon basin for since 1990, many different organizations and roles. I'm also the founder of Amazon Watch and currently serve as a board member. And right now, what I'm speaking to you about is wearing my hat of the Director of Global Strategy for the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Initiative. And this is an initiative that's comprised of an alliance of 30 indigenous nations. Maybe I could share my screen here. I'll show a few slides. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, would you put that in presenter
Into
mode?
the presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go.
I know those faces.
So the alliance was formed in 2017 with indigenous organizations representing 30 different indigenous nations through their representative organizations, which in Peru is IDESEP and all of the base of IDESEP organizations. And in Ecuador is Confeniai, and then COICA, which is the Federation of Indigenous Nations of all of the Amazon Basin, kind of sealed the memorandum of understanding to create this alliance. The alliance has been around working basically to protect an area that's the size of the state of Oregon, 86 million acres. It's in the headwaters of the Napo, Pastaza, and portion of the Marañón Basin, and both starting in the glaciers in Ecuador and all the way going to Iquitos in Peru. The initiative has been building a shared long-term vision to basically permanently protect this area, creating a region off limits to industrial extraction, a bioregional approach that puts the integrity and well-being of the the biome at the center of all decision making. And so what we've been working on is basically advancing indigenous territorial rights and also shifting the economic paradigm, including programs and projects for restoration conservation for a well-being economy. So I'll just say that this area has registered some of the highest biodiversity anywhere in the Amazon basin, which is probably the most biodiverse place on the planet. And we are also seeing that the Amazon is reaching a tipping point of no return. We know about that. You've been hearing about that in other sessions. But this area is significantly important in maintaining the ecological functions of the Amazon. So what is the vision? Over the last 5 years, the indigenous organizations, through their alliance and through a secretariat housed at the Pachamama Alliance, have been working on a bioregional plan for the permanent protection of the headwaters. I'll put the link in there so you can download it. It's truly innovative initiative to put, again, the bioregion at the center. The vision is that this area is permanently protected and restored as a living bioregion, and that Indigenous peoples' forest stewardship visions and practices are what guide our basically our programs and policies. That in by 2030, the people in the forests are flourishing in a prosperous well-being economy, and that the region is contributing to reversing climate change and biodiversity loss, and is an inspiring model for ecological transitions everywhere. Here's a map of the Sacred Headwaters bioregion. The area that's outlined in white is the core of the region, but really on our analysis looked all the way to the area that's in orange, a larger area, because the deforestation fronts are coming from the outside of the white area. So we really need to look at our initiatives having an impact in the core of the area and also on the outskirts, in the buffer areas. And what you see in the colors is the land titles that are already recognized for Indigenous peoples of this area. And there's a number of proposals in the Peruvian Amazon that would help to advance autonomous territorial rights for 9 indigenous nations in Peru. So this is the goal of the bioregional plan, basically ensuring the well-being of the people who live there. There's 600,000 to 700,000 indigenous people who belong to these 30 nations that live there. An additional 2.5 million non-indigenous people live in small towns throughout this landscape. The plan addresses both the indigenous people's visions and life plans in their territories, but also the larger what is needed in all of the bioregion. Other goals of the plan are enhancing territorial governance and basically supporting defending territories, promoting conservation and restoration, eliminating forest degradation, and stopping the expansion of extractive industries. Within that, we came up with 9 axes of action on the that are all cross-cutting. I know that's a really difficult slide to read, but I invite you to look at the PDF version of the bioregional plan. But everything from looking at better planning and retrofitting of cities to things like reforestation, to conservation, to renewable energy, technology, looking at education and intercultural healthcare. Basically, this represents a version of a compilation of Indigenous people's life plans, which are very holistic. And so that was a mandate to think in that holistic pathway. We also are proposing a series of basically public policies and actions at the level of the governments, which relate to things like expanding the extractive industries, creating a way to use debt relief and other financial instruments to encourage countries that are debt-strapped to take action, to commit to conservation targets. Also a new system of well-being indicators that measure well-being, not just growth or economic GDP. So basically systems for valuing the living systems, ecological systems. So at the end of the day, what do we at the end of 2030, where do we think we want to be? What are concrete things that this Sacred Headwaters Initiative Alliance has contributed to achieving? So I would just summarize it. There's many, many, many things that this initiative attempts to do, but the key top line items is the legal recognition of 9 million hectares or 22 million acres in mostly Peruvian Amazon, where indigenous territories are being claimed, autonomous territories being claimed, and are not yet legally acknowledged or recognized. So also ensuring the well-being of the living conditions of the people, so what we call the standing forest economy, that's helping indigenous peoples to have things like ecotourism and alternative livelihoods, but also food sovereignty, energy security, and those kinds of things that are internal indicators of resilient, flourishing communities. We also have about 20 million hectares of rainforest in this area that is not and have any kind of protection designation. So whether it's designating some level of indigenous lands or uncontacted people's territories or protected areas of many kinds, this area is one of their goals is to help to achieve permanent protection for the unprotected, highly biodiverse areas within this landscape. The thing that's I think of interest to this would be, okay, the 8.7 million hectares or 20 million acres of forest that need to be restored in order to maintain landscape connectivity. We're starting currently with 2 pilot projects of reforestation, which are around 300 hectares in Ecuador and similarly in Peru. But the idea is that we need to scale to millions of acres of reforestation and regeneration and restoration. The whole initiative is going to be governed. A Sacred Headwaters Fund is being established, governed by mostly indigenous organizations, and that ultimately that's what needs to be fundraised for in order for all of this implementation to happen. And then, the public policies that were in the works continue to be campaigns that indigenous people lead with their allies, things like creating a moratorium on fossil fuels, which currently we have a 12-month moratorium thanks to indigenous people's actions in the Ecuadorian Amazon, but things like also around debt relief, well-being indicators and others, policies that we would call the Amazon Green New Deal. So I think that's all else I have to share today. There's so much more to say. We have various bodies that are helping. We have working groups. We have a commission of global experts. We have Wisdom Keepers Council, a governing council of about 30 leaders who belong to the different indigenous organizations in this landscape, and many more. So I invite you to join and also watch Amazonia 2041. I'll put the links to those in the chat. The Amazonia 2041 will give you a kind of a retrospective, imaginary look at how we achieved all of this, looking from 2041 back to today. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you.
Oh my goodness, Atosa, thank you so much for your work. You had years working with Amazon Watch, and to see the progression also to this direct action restoration work. It's such an impressive initiative. And I know that many of us here want to know how to best support. So definitely put in the chat those calls to action for all these projects. Some of these seem like, okay, you're so resourced, you got it. But I know that we have to mobilize to sort of get behind these initiatives. And we have, all of us, such access to an incredibly rich global network of all sorts of resource, expert, amplification, media, etc. So I really want to ensure that these projects have the opportunity to say, here's what we're looking for, because it really is a cooperative effort to get behind these sort of tips of the arrow, as it were, where we're really seeing the tipping point and leverage and trim tabs for change. So I'm so thrilled by this initiative, and Atosa, all your hard work. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a real honor, and we look forward to the continued journey. With that, I'm actually going to invite Pablo. I know, Pablo, you're not feeling well. I'm so grateful you stuck around, and maybe after this, although you're probably inspired, I know you need to rest. You're struggling with COVID and have been with us this morning. But you have several projects that you're representing, and it's interesting because some of them are in the same region, the sort of northern headwaters. So what I'd love is for you to have the opportunity to share about the Andes Accion, the global forest generation, Treeangle, and any of the other project efforts that you're representing today. Pablo Friedlander, thank you so much, friend. Go ahead.
Thank you. I will be brief, and also, yes, I feel very inspired by this work, especially the Amazon Sacred Headwaters. Completely good line to follow in many aspects, and I believe very convergent with what Accion Andina is doing in her bit in the Andes, in just bordering these headwaters of the Amazon with the highest forest of the Polylepis trees, the highest kind of forest in this planet that grows in between 1,500 meters until 5,000 meters altitude and makes the birth of all these big rivers of South America from Venezuela to Argentina, in all the mountain ranges, especially to the eastern side, but not only, and in other mountainous regions that are not the Andes, but arrive to this altitude. This high forest is the real source of rivers, like in the Amazon, and also in the Amazon, you meet down the hill all the other basins. What is happening with Accion Andina, previously called Andes Accion, also in English, but now decisively called in Spanish for the root it has, it comes from Cusco, from the Incas in some way. We were before many projects working with ecological restoration of this high kind of forest and with education or environmental education programs in the remote communities of the top of the mountains in Argentina, Peru, Bolivia, and other countries, but mostly Argentina and Peru at the beginning. And then a network of many other projects came unifying or in some way interconnecting all of us, the Milk in the Project model that we have here in Champaqui Mountain from 20 years with the other big work that the government of Chile is doing, regreening the deserts of Atacama in the high areas with the same altitude, with the same kind of forest, but very different circumstances, with the other grassroots projects emerging from indigenous communities, from Queros, from others around Cusco valleys, from Vilcanota. There are many, many model projects that make a possibility for us to arrive to similar standards and to get a kind of discipline from the new Incas, from Cusco's, bringing this program with Global Forest Generation and the association Ecosistemas Andinos, ECOAN, and Tino Auca Chutas, a great leader of that initiative, original from Cusco and a biologist with big experience in that field, together with Florent Kaiser, the CEO of Global Forest Generation, had convinced us, many other local projects and countries and organizations to implement the same program upon a very good base, because it was not only another, let's say, development programs to include the locals, but it was really based in the reciprocity ways, in the scaling up, reducing costs, but taking care of the essential. So of course, not the optimum, because it grew from very base with very little budget to a lot, to plant millions of trees each year with more than 14 organizations in 6 Andean countries, with many good results and very good monitoring, and growing in the last 5 years from these previous experiences, but properly in the last 5 years, upon a common ground of discipline that I believe is not only very good for all the Andes and for all the rivers and creeks that descend from the Andes in all the countries, but also as a model to cross-pollinate with what urgently is needed in the Amazon and big scale, like Amazon Sacred Headwaters is doing, and like others in Brazil border with Peru also trying to do with all that difficulties, and like the Amazon Swarm Group is also putting together many perspectives every week from some time. I think this kind of cross-pollination of the models that are already existing, demonstrable, and we can have that feedback with the local metrics that are so much needed, are important for us. And now talking more locally, Andes Accion or Accion Andina took us from a very little demonstrational project to becoming an organization that implement all this initiative in the country with many communities. That big jump, it is difficult for all the organizations, as it was for us, and it's not easy, but I think that's why we really need to work out the tools to work more in networks to empower the capacities of each cell or each node of these networks that is restoring to self-operate all these complex mechanisms that takes to do it well, like is proper follow-up with all the invoices and the geo-referentiated photos with all the monitoring parcels, even if this is rooted in the most local traditions and ways of doing, 1 to 3% following that. And of course, the more transparent what we can become, the bigger as an entity or as a movement we can grow. I believe that standards are not very frequent to see, and Accion Andina, for us, it was a model, and it is the only constant source of finances, even in the most extreme COVID times when all the donors step out, they continue. And that really helps, even if it's covering 1/5 of what one needs. And then I go more to the concrete part. That is, they, yes, are financing approx $1 per tree planted in these ways and grow in these ways, of course, complex mechanism. But for a community to do it in the long cycles properly, of course, we need more, 4 other dollars probably. One, to secure the land where that will be planted. Another, to create the workshops or environmental programs in the local rural schools around the area where it's planted to secure the future of that field and not just itself. Another, to producing all the research protocols and scientific monitoring from the new paradigm that produce the models that we need. And another, as said, talking on Treeangle approach, and this is based, emerging from every project, the ability of develop some products and services like we do with Champa tea from Champaqui mountain, with the herbs of a mountain that are 100% at the benefit of the reforestation of that mountain. These products that are virtuous cycles or services that generates virtuous cycles that are able to sustain a regeneration process like this during generations. And this probably is our challenge. When we, like a little project of one remote mountain in Argentina, Champaqui Mountain, Milk in the Clouds project, became learning from the Institute of Ecotechnics, learning from the local universities and learning the discipline of the Incas of reforestation, as was talking about, visiting John Liu and the camps, the regeneration festivals, then we realized that we had a model to share with other basins. The replicability was so important. We started to do that, and then we became Accion Serrana, like Accion Andina, like a fractal of that movement of all the Andes countries, but for our region, the Sierras Grandes of Cordoba. So this kind of fractal thinking, I believe, is so important, both to have very locally rooted initiatives that becomes models and not the other way around, probably models that parachute as projects, but models that emerge from underground projects, and then the necessity of working high scale, but at the same time keeping middle measures, regional, bioregional coherence, like we do with Accion Serrana for Accion Andina, but each one of the 14 different projects of Accion Serrana with their own identity and basins, and all the other 14 international organizations of Accion Andina also keeping their own, let's say, sovereign ways, but sharing this common ground that is important to share. I believe for the Amazon, that is probably now the more candid, the more important theme, is more difficult because the realities, the complexities, the hardness, the war that is happening there is more difficult, yes. But I'm happy to apply all the efforts needed to arrive to this kind of understanding. And I believe it's only necessary through, or possible through partnerships, through synergies, and through a real reciprocal approach, like we had listened before, generating abundance for us, for everybody, for both sides, and not only what is fair, and not only to regenerate, but to recreate together what is possible in these times. For that, yes, I feel inspired. I would like to talk more technical things about it, but I think for now, in terms of Accion Andina as a Andes countries movement in growth, and I would love Florent was here to talk about it because was the plan, but he had a problem with the family. I'm in this case representing his voice. My voice is what Argentina has to do with it from the beginning, because we were the first partner to say, yes, let's do it. And then my little voice from here, my home, my mountain Champaqui, that is milking the clouds, a local project that through 20 years with good help of great friends did it until this level, but now recognizing, okay, now we need to do it everybody at the same pace, every basin. This is the challenge, I think, and this is a place we are now, thinking strategies, fighting for finding the proper ways of financing and building the teams that are needed. That is the key, the essential point. The proper teams, intercultural teams, upon the best models from very well local roots. I think that's abstract. I don't know if you like to go more deep in one or other detail.
It's time today, Pablo. That's so great. Yeah, and I feel like because there's so much rich territory, you should absolutely put in the chat the resources, because especially the Accion Andina, which I need to get better about saying because it was flipped before, and I'm participating in this shift out of a colonial way of languaging these projects. I know we're partnered with you all, and when I saw the incredible amount of what you've already accomplished and the incredible amount of communities and volunteers, I think it's something like 18,000 volunteers that are working on reforestation through that collective alone, let alone the other 3 projects that you've named, Pablo. So if you would please put them in the chat so people can explore the work. I think it's really important that people understand the enormity of what you guys are undertaking and how successful it is at gaining traction and really getting involvement and participation. So Pablo, thank you, especially for not feeling well and really being here. And I just want to name too, I just have to name it. I can't help myself when I'm on with Pablo, which is regularly these days, and the birds are in the background. I noted in the chat, I just want to thank the winged ones. I just want to thank the opportunity that here we are on these screens. But anytime we have the opportunity to welcome the voices of nature and remember that we have that same thing I have about the language barrier, right? The colonial mindset of a particular way of speaking. I really want to acknowledge the decolonization of the language of the earth and remember that every time the birds chirp so happily in the background, it's because they're in a place that they feel safe and flourishing and protected, where steward is doing that work, right? Like each of you are keepers of this sacred contract and reciprocity with the living earth. So I just want to celebrate because I felt like the birds were like, joyfully joining us in this gathering of souls today. And I think it's really important that after you get off the line with us today, please go outside and just breathe and connect and make a moment off the computer, because that's to me the real work that we're here to do. And how great that we get to share and celebrate that together, you know, in this global format and be connected by something also that helps us recognize and see each other. But all you got to do is go outside and breathe and you realize there you all are. There's my friends, you know. Oh, I can feel you already because there you are, connected to the same waters and the same air. So I don't want to go on a tirade here, but because you had the birds in, it felt really important to punctuate the fact that I felt their voices here with us in this space. So Pablo, thank you for sharing. With that, I am going to come back to the business at hand, the matter at hand here. And I'm going to welcome our next presenter, which is Johnathan Kabat with the Hotlum Ecorestoration Camp. John Liu earlier shared about the ecosystem restoration camps that he has helped spark with his own dream. And then that dream comes to life in those who have been stewarding these camps on the ground. And Johnathan's been doing incredible work in Shasta area, which is so fire torn right now. So Johnathan, I'd love to hear your work and have you share the work that you're doing here in the Northern California region. You with us, Johnathan? Oh,
yeah, I'm trying to share my screen here. So I know that I'm speaking to the choir here, and a lot of my presentation, I think, is meant to kind of inspire those that are maybe a little, sitting on the fence or, sitting indoors and not actively participating in the healing of our relationship with the more than human world. I want to admittedly say that my background is in eco-psychology, and as a clinical psychotherapist, And I had this vision to have a place where people could do contemplative practice and retreats in service of shifting paradigms and emotional bonds with the more than human world. And somehow I've landed in something much, much bigger than I ever imagined. So the Hotlum Eco Regeneration Camp is really a place that's dedicated to healing our relationships with the more than human world. Let's see if I can get this to show. Hopefully it shows while I'm talking. So this is a little drone footage to give you kind of the scale of this small project. It's 48.5 hectares on the slopes of an iconic volcano. And this volcano has captured the imagination of many. But what people don't realize is how the timber extraction to build the railroads and to basically build the Western United States has highly impacted this area. You know, from the late 1800s, and in particular in the 1940s and 50s, the timber extraction here was enormous. And so this land has been clear cut multiple times, the last time in the 90s. And you can see the tall trees growing on the right there of the screen. And that is the steep sections of the lava. And there you have Mount Shasta in the background. That's where we sit. Whoops. And I want to say something about inspiration. One of the reasons I think that this area is really important is not just its importance in the bioregion in which it sits, but also that it's iconic and inspirational. And Common Lands Foundation says that one of the 4 returns is inspiration. And I really, truly believe that the spiritual resources and the motivational resources of the world around us is crucial. I want to say just something about the word regeneration and why we call ourselves the Eco Regeneration Camp. Eco being home, and re would be to do something again or once more, and then generation is to beget or to give. And so I think of this term as the act of again birthing a home. Hotlum is something that people have often questioned. And the reason we call it Hotlum is because that's what it says on the map. But Hotlum is a Shasta word from the Shasta people who were genocided, and it means steep. And if you look at the base of this photo, you can see it starts to get really dark and really steep. And that is the location right there at the base of this photo where it starts to get really dark. The other reason why this land is important is because it's zoned for the purpose of timber production, which does allow for ecological education and recreation. And it's an important criteria for zoning to be able to do the kind of activities that we wanted to do. So those are the reasons why this place exists. The Shasta people are the unceded people of this area going up into Southern Oregon, and they were genocided in the 1850s. Then came the fur rush. Some of the rivers in this area, in particular the Scott River, had some of the most prolific populations of beaver in North America. And yet for decades, maybe over 100 years, it was denied that there were any indigenous beaver in California. And then we had the gold rush. And one of the largest gold extractions in the world took place in this region. And people rarely think of this area as a gold producing area. And then of course, the timber extractions, which really affected in particular this area on the slopes of Mount Shasta. And the removal was complete. The way that they did removals in the 1800s and early 20th century was to not plant afterwards, and it really affected the soils. And the amazing amount of work that Abner Weed, the founder of the town Weed and a major lumber baron, did. And you can see here that by the 1950s, 4.5 billion linear board feet of lumber were being produced annually and extracted and taken around the country. So we're really here on this place to actively participate in the restoration and healing of humanity's relationship with the biosphere. And we have numerous objectives. I won't go into all of them today, but it's a complex project because I think these are complex issues. One of the main things that is in my heart is eco-psychology retreats. And when I look at this picture, I almost break into tears. This is the grandmother Ponderosa. She is now has lost her life due to the lava fire. She was a multi-hundred-year-old gigantic Ponderosa. You can see our friend sitting next to her and how enormous she was. Then I was introduced to John Liu, and we joined ecosystem restoration camps, and he's been a tremendous benefactor. We realized early on, even before I purchased the property, that managing the fuel load and the fire ecology there was going to be crucial to the restoration. So we've hosted biochar workshops and workshops with Nature Conservancy Trex training program to help people learn about how to safely do indigenous practices and participate in indigenous burnings. And we're launching a forest tenders practice where we're really trying to tend a new form of forestry that includes traditional ecological knowledge and novel approaches utilizing dry land permaculture techniques. And we really believe that we need to reacclimate our palate to native foods. And so supporting wild tending and foraging, I think, is really, really crucial to changing our culture around consuming foods from global sources. I think we need to eat more locally. I'll skip this video as quickly as I can. Let's see if it will skip for me. In June of 2021, we had a catastrophic fire that burned for 10.5 weeks and burned 26,000 acres. And I'd love to show you the video that I was skipping past, but I don't have time. It shows drone footage and it can be seen on YouTube. But basically this green forest became a death zone. 98% of the conifers are gone. The oaks and the mountain mahoganies were taken out. The oaks are regenerating, but most of the trees are in dire straits. And then following that, in October, we had an atmospheric river event, which caused historic flooding throughout California. And our road systems were decimated, and it affected infrastructure, including the railroad below us and the highway below us. It's the wind up there in that area is really powerful, and you combined wind and water, and we lost all of our topsoil. We also lost our road access to this river event, and we're struggling to keep access with vehicles to the property for restoration work. But it may be at some point that the area is no longer accessible to vehicles, which would be an interesting endeavor to, re-implement other forms of transportation. This is a picture of me standing next to the road cut. The road is at the surface of my hat, and John Liu has driven this road many, many times, and we lost that much soil in one rain event. And so looking to this fall, when we're expecting more rain, we don't know what these gullies are going to produce. So I'm looking at models of deep adaptation and cultural norm shifts. I believe that we had a pseudo community developing during the pandemic. We entered the chaos phase with the fire. We've been resting in emptiness for a year. Hardly anyone has been on the property for a year except for a 400 tree planting experiment and some soil studies. And now we're about to launch a new community where we're looking at bioregional approaches, hopefully partnering with larger organizations, including Earth Regenerators and Common Lands Foundation, to do a project that would encompass 10 million acres of the Klamath watershed. And we would just be a small contributor to that, working with the Karuk Nation. So we are in the storming stage right now. And we've learned a lot from our mistakes. This is one of the projects we're going to be doing, planting 4,500 trees in this small red area. But as you can see, we've got a lot more to do than that. We're doing soil studies. We're utilizing some novel approaches to sequester water in the remnants of where stumps used to be, to catch water and hold water. And we're also planting up on the lava flow. And you can imagine how difficult it is to try to plant a tree in a lava flow. But that was where we had the most forests. And we're also trying some novel ideas of a net and pan model, utilizing the already pre-existing runnels that go between these stump holes. And we're working with the USDA's National Resource Conservation Service on a grant we've been working on for 3 years. And we're also getting some support from private donors, and that's been really, really supportive. We've raised over $30,000 in the last 2 years to support our continuing work. So we hope that you can come join us and camp with us and practice reconnecting our hearts and our minds to restoring this planet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Johnathan. I just have been watching the ravage of the fires in the West. I'm up here in the West as well in Fire Nation, and so much of this is so avoidable. And I think that's what's so challenging, is that we're sort of, for every step we make forward and all these beautiful projects that are making progress, there's all of this cascading sort of impact that then unravels the work. And I know that it takes so much courage to continue to be bolstered and to be committed and to be devoted when you watch the work that you've done and the tending that you've done to place in an instant be ravaged, whether it's by a flood or a fire or all these compounding crises. But I appreciate the continuum of work and devotion. And I think it was earlier, Jean-Louis said it, but it also came up earlier in the opening session today, that there's sort of this grace and accepting that all things will pass, including us. And so while we're here, it isn't that we give up our effort to simply show up in a way that's good and right and true and just. You know what I mean? That it's like the effort that we give every day to this work is the power that we have to be part of a ongoing living continuum. And I just appreciate so much what it takes to just for all of you, for all of us, to find the will and the motivation and, the composure every day to say, I'm going to keep doing this work when it sometimes feels like the odds are stacked against us. But I know, and the point that you're making, Johnathan, is the relationship that we're in is the real medicine. It's the beauty, and being in a relationship with the earth means you show up and you keep showing up to do what is needed to be a symbiotic helper, friend, ally, of the planet. So I just really respect and appreciate your work. And I know how much has been undone in these last few years, particularly with the fires, and it's just hard to watch, but I appreciate so much your share today. Thank you for being with us. And we're going to go from that to, and please do put your contacts in the chat. I think it's really important while they're also on screen, any resources, et cetera, that people can follow up with, I think is really helpful for other people to connect. And my good friend, Rob DeLaet, I would really love for you to go next. Rob's with the World Climate School, but also so many, I don't know, Rob, you don't really belong to anything. You belong to Gaia. And she has you in service in so many places around the world, tirelessly efforting as well, continuing to find that will and the force of love each day that you carry to do the work that you do. So why don't you share about the work that you do? And thanks again, Johnathan, and thank you, Rob. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jamaica. Thank you, Caitlin, for organizing all of this. Let me see if I can you give me a share screen? Yeah,
let's see, Johnathan, we'll have you stop share. See if I can figure this out. There we go. And then you should be able to share screen, Rob.
Okay. then I have to go to, yes.
Yes,
And
present
so
your work will help us see it a little bit better.
you can see this, yes?
We can, yep, there it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm a climate activist. I've been doing all kinds of things for a long time, but basically through a dream by the Amazon forest itself. In 2019, I realized that the best impact I could have is actually serving that great biome. And since then, I've been working at averting the tipping point of dieback of the Amazon rainforest, which I'm sure most of you are very familiar with, but I'll race through the thing again one more time, the danger that we are in. Let me start with a positive thing. It is more and more clear to the world at large that actually the global warming is not just caused by CO2, but also by the destruction of forests. And a recent article just 2 months ago or so came out and showed that the forests in the blue zone on this picture actually already perform this eco-service of keeping the planet cool by at least 1 degree through evapotranspiration and cloud forming, not by carbon alone. Which means actually, if you can count, if you would double it, we could cool the planet. And if you would take them away, we would be really, really in deep trouble. So, and one more time, although everybody is very much aware of the Amazon rainforest, I'd like to give you some perspective. First of all, you see in the top left-hand corner, you see how big the forest is, and it really looks like a planetary organ. I think if we see the whole Earth as a living being, then you can see that this is the pumping heart of the planet. And also you see it compared to Australia, the United States and Europe, it is really, really large. It provides about 8% of the global oxygen. Quite often people think it's 20, but that goes for all the forests. It could absorb about 15% of all global emissions if it was healthy, but right now it's a net emitter, so it could absorb everything that, for instance, the United States is emitting right now. The river system is so incredibly large that of all the water that flows through rivers, a quarter flows through the rivers of the Amazon rainforest. And it's crucial for the atmosphere, for the atmospheric circulation, especially of water vapor around the world. As Atos already mentioned, it is the most biodiverse area in the world, with probably 30% of the world's species. And it's crucial to the health of the planet. And as I said, it actually helps cooling the planet. So here you see a map of this enormous biome, and then the red parts are the parts where the destruction is. And you see that especially on the east and the southeast side, there is an enormous destruction. If you could see one patch just on the east side, you see there's a sort of a heart with, and that's actually the Xingu, and one of the largest indigenous areas around. And you see that the indigenous peoples are the one who are protecting the forest, and many of them actually pay with their lives for it. So I have a little bit of problem because there's something in between. So what is happening right now is that there's so much destruction of the forest that the cooling of the forest starts faltering. So it's heating up much faster than other areas, especially in the south and southeast. And also the amount of water vapor is diminishing. And that is very important because basically the Amazon rainforest, while drawing moisture from the Atlantic rainforest, is actually recycling that moisture 6-7 times, basically irrigating over itself. It forms its own weather system. Right now, that is getting weaker, and that's why we are near the tipping point of the dieback, which once it really sets in at full speed, it will go accelerated, and within decades, at least 70% of the forest would be gone. That's the size, again, of Australia, of the United States. So we have no time to lose to avert the dipping of the dieback, because we actually do have the knowledge to cool the planet and calm the weather and regenerate the planet. But we first have to make sure that we don't get into these catastrophic cascades of degradation. just the CO2 alone that would come from the Amazon rainforest would be enough to raise us past 1.5 and 2 degrees. But the effect of the cooling of the forests, which would fall away, would be even much bigger. So then we come to we're going to drill down now slowly to the project. Basically, when I talked to Antonio Nobre about the biotic pump, basically he said that the biggest way to draw in more moisture over the area to avert the drying out and the dieback of the large parts of the Amazon, which right now is happening and it's accelerating, is by reforesting in the red area where most of the canopy has been hacked away at. And in that area, there is the Mosaic Gurupi. That's a group of 5 indigenous territories with a total of 1.7 hectares or 4.2 million acres within a larger area of about 4.6 million hectares. And the indigenous territories have been half destroyed. The areas in between are basically largely without trees and are basically cattle farming and corn and what have you. So if we would be able to reforest this area, that biotic pump function would already start functioning better. And that is the aim that I'm working at right now. And one of the lucky things that happened to me was that Ronilson Guajajara, one of the young chiefs of this area in the Arariboya area, connected to me not that long ago, 1.5 years ago, and asked me to help reforest the area, which of course he asked other ones as well. And so I started a small foundation called Future of the Amazon, and we answered the call and started to work. Now, to give you an idea, the indigenous peoples that live in this area and that really want to have their forests restored are several: the Guajajara, the Tembe, the Awaguaja, and there's small groups of uncontacted Awa people as well, and the Kapor. And all of them basically want their forests back. They want to restore it, defend it, and live in it. So recently I came there for my 3rd visit and again to talk to them. And here you see the local fire brigade and with Lou Nielsen and other people, we were actually looking at how fast the forest was regenerating after devastating fires from 6 years ago. And some of the trees already reached 15 meters high, 45 feet or so. So actually regeneration is going very fast. So the most important thing that we need to do is actually protect the forest against fire and destruction, which is still happening day by day. And apart from that, we need to do reforestation and extra agroforestry for food. This all needs quite a large finance because it's a large area. But still, a lot of people have already picked up the job and started doing regeneration. And there's hundreds of volunteers right now in all kinds of villages collecting seeds, forming women associations for planting and growing young seedlings. And you see me there in that car. It's really an inaccessible area. It takes a while before you're really down there. And this is what territory looks like after the forest has been burned down. Here, these 3 young guys, they are basically seeding this area. The day it was there, it was about 42 degrees in the afternoon. So by that time they had gone, but you see that it's completely destroyed and the topsoil is gone. And this is roughly how it could look like if it had been restored or if it had never been destroyed in the first place, or when it really can recover. And the average temperature roughly would be around 25 degrees or 77 around this time of the year. So the first projects have started. About 50 people will get rewarded to reforest, organized by Eden Projects, a large reforester that works around the world. And hundreds of volunteers are already active and basically starting to self-organize without us giving it too much of a push, because once the word came around, they really started doing it more and more. A commitment for 20,000 hectares or about 20 million trees has been given off. and we're busy with the financing of that. If this all would work, it's a very basic program. It starts with the regeneration of the forest, but it would improve the lives of about 15,000 people who are based in this area. And we hope that we can actually train a new generation of indigenous project managers to then also do other projects like healthcare, schooling. They've been talking about getting food stores in there, and they have all kinds of plans for bioeconomy. And so basically what we are now doing is doing fundraising to scale this up, because the structures are there and we could scale up tomorrow if the funds were there. And finally, I'd like to say that it is a critical area to draw in humidity for the whole of the Amazon. So the world should really focus also on this particular area to reforest. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Rob, thank you so much. Again, make sure to put that into the chat. And I want to also acknowledge that Rob will be on for our next session after this one, which is the role of water, soil, vegetation, and cooling the planet, with several of you that are here and a few other presenters. But I think there's a really important conversation about these planetary tipping points, and along with that sort of restoration work on the ground, really looking at how, if we're wise about our interventions, and there's a lot of you here that are very wise, knowing what we need to do, if we do them in a thoughtful way, they do start creating a cascading reverse effect to this degradation and amplification and fast volatility of all of these sort of cascading crises. And the planet responds very quickly when we sort of work in key areas of change. And so I really look forward, if people have the interest, to stick around for that next session. I think we'll dive deeper into some of these sort of mechanisms and the relationship between soil and vegetation and water and the cooling that it does to the planet. And I just want to acknowledge Rob has been one of my greatest teachers, along with Marcel and some others here, about these relations and the relationships of the possibility to actually start working to reverse some of this. So Rob, thanks for sharing this particular project effort. Do put it in the chat, and then stick around to hear more of the work that the science and the work that Rob and others are doing, because it's very inspiring for the potential. We just have to mobilize to make it happen. So thank you so much, Rob, for sharing this today. And let's see, we have only a few more to go. I think we're going to make time. Every single one of these global roundtables has been bursting at the seams, and I appreciate everybody being lean with time, with so much richness to share. But I do think we're going to do well and hold the container for that. I did want to ask Oriol Tarragó Costa from the Montserrat project to go next. Oriol, if you're here, you've been waiting patiently, and I'd really love to hear about your work. Thank you so much.
Very welcome, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you, Oriol.
Wonderful. Let me do, I don't know how to do this, but I will. Let me. How to do the sharing screen? Here. Okay. Compartir. All right.
And if you want to try that in presenter too, the biggest possible, it's easier to see.
What do you, it's okay now, no?
Yeah, it's okay. There it is. That's perfect. Thank you.
See, perfect. Very welcome. I want to explain our project IDEOM, Montserrat Holistic Research Institute. We are into the Treeangle Foundation with Matutu, Champaqui, Argentina, Brazil, and we are close to the Barcelona city, and really close to the airport, only 50 minutes. And this is the Montserrat, that we have this incredible mountain in our land, Catalonia. We are natives. We are part of this land for a long, long time. We are aborigines of their land, Catalan aborigines. And with our project, what we want is to show doing the things is that the humans and nature can coexist in a balanced, sustainable, and harmonious way. Because if we want to demonstrate, we need to do it. And our project, for 14 years, we have started, and we have done projects that helps to demonstrate that we can do it in different way. We are really close to Occident, really Barcelona and Catalonia, Spain, and it's good that people can know how to do different things. And of course, the way that to do it is we help everybody, and there is more benefits and not so impact. Now, Ireom, we have started 14 years old. We bought a land, a 35 hectares land, and we started to reconstruct the edifications. The main house that you are saying with the people are doing a circle is the main house that we couldn't put energy with money and reconstruct, but we restored the other parts of our property. And when we arrived in 7 years, we started to say, okay, we are here for 7 years. What we can do? We have lived here for these years, and we need to stop. We need to put them up, and then we did a strategic plan that I will talk to you. Here, we have done all the works, we have done all the works with voluntaries, with non-profit organization. That 20 people we start, now we are 12. We are doing this project every day, doing the best with voluntaries that when we need them. And here there is the properties, there is the valley, 550 hectares, valley, Vall d'Artigas Colla, totally close to Montserrat, you can see in your left. And Ireom is in the centrum, and Ireom and Cal Pons, friends, really close friends of us, we are doing a project that is a strategic plan of these 550 hectares with different axes, I don't know in my English, axes, that one of them is, one of them is territory and landscape. We are involved, myself, I am for 30 years going every summer with the firefighters to fight fire in our lands, Catalonia and Mediterranean forests in Catalonia. There are special effects for the fires. We have seen that this area that you are saying, because before 150 years ago, it was been a yard agriculture, and it was full of mosaic, and we didn't have this forest that is going, and no mosaic is in. The forest that the people who was working here, well, 100 years ago, they abandoned the forest, and then the forest come back again with the fields. And now we have the real problem in our land. And this project that I want to explain you, a concrete project that we are going to do, is about how we can do in this land this is particular, like a permaculture view that a lot of people are like Mr. Liu, that are doing different techniques that we can demonstrate that if we do this, we can go fighting to the fires and fighting the decrease of the biodiversity and other things. And then let me see it. This is the project that we are doing. The government, the Spanish government in Catalonia gave us a award. They gave money to do this project, and we do another hydrologic management of Casteller Basin for taking control of avenues, forest fires, and improve biodiversity. This is our valley. This is the lines of water. This is different maps. And this is the main objective of this project that we are presenting to you, that I will send in a web the archive if I can, is define actions to manage the waters in the basin, increasing the retention time to eliminate the floatings and increase the humidity of the land, to keep every drop of water that falls as long as possible in the valley. This is the main objective of this project that we are presenting, and we want to demonstrate in a test, at the pilot test in all the valley, and we'll see if the government gave us the permissions and it arrived the money and it arrived the helping. The second objectives that of course we'll find if we do this is reduced peak flow, soil erosion, mosaic of habitats, recharge of aquifers. Of course, there we have an incredible dry time, and every time the water is going more strong in a little time, and then it's really important to do this kind of structures in Mediterranean forests too. And changes, well, another things, quality of forest structure, reduce forest risk, encourage biodiversity. This is one of the secondary objectives that all of you sure you know. This is the project. This is a resume project. This project is done about three network. ADF is a voluntary for 35 years old in Catalonia, close to the professional firefighters. We go to firefight on forest in summers, and with them and in Oriol project we did this agreement together, and we start to do this project. It's in English. I will send it. It doesn't matter here, but I want to show you more or less, because it's more nice to see it, is the techniques that we use. Wooden creep wall digs. These the people, we did the works. Then we have done two, because the work gave us money to do this too. That's this pilot. I don't know in English, sorry, I don't know. But you can see here the first flood that it comes, the water avenue in the last month. And now water is keeping inside, but we need more, then we'll do the insulation.
One minute, Oriol.
Okay, laminating pond, that another techniques, infiltration lines, infiltration trenches. This is the techniques. But the best that we want to say is that we want to test this in this land. This land is a perfect place to test, and then demonstrate with universities, because there are universities doing works with us in another part of the land for the forest. And we can demonstrate in really simple place that this is possible and it works, because we have demonstrated around the world and here too. Thank you so much for hearing me, and the best for all of us and all of us.
Oriol,
Okay.
thank you so much for presenting and being with us today. I feel like it's just the whole intent was to really note it. This is a global effort, and it's happening everywhere, and we have so much to learn together, right? There's so much that's like, you know, what are you learning in this region? What are we learning in this region? Even though so many ecologies are so different, there's so many of the same principles to apply, and the same understanding share about what's successful. And I really appreciate hearing your model. Make sure to put your information in the chat as well, so people can learn more and check out your work. And we really appreciate you being here with us today. I am going to move us to the next presenter so we can make sure to get through on time. 3T Vikil with Eye on the Rainforest is part of the Institute of Ecotechnics, some of our core partners that we've been working with, and 3T, really excited to hear about your work in Eco. Thank you so much for sharing. And let's see, Oriol, we'll probably have you stop share screen. Let's see if I can do that.
Yeah. All right. So sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us. And 3T,
thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm so happy to know several of you who have already talked in this. I give thanks to the land that I'm on here. I've been working with the Institute of Ecotechnics for the last maybe 35 years or so of my life. And the project that I'm with currently was started hot on the heels of an Amazonian expedition on a ship that enabled, it was an ethnobotanical expedition, and enabled the crew to really get a sense of, in this time in the early 80s, deforestation that was going on in the Amazon and illegal logging, etc. When the ship arrived back in Puerto Rico, just giving a very quick history of how this project got here. When they arrived back in Puerto Rico in the early 80s, they got together with the Department of Natural Resources, and it was something that happened over a couple of years or so, and about 900 acres of land was put together to start a sustainable forestry project. And one of the things about the Institute of Ecotechnics that I've always appreciated is this idea of doing something necessary that is not being done. And I think this project was exactly that at the time, and is still very necessary and something not being done. It is still the only sustainable forestry project in the Caribbean. And 40,000 hardwood trees were planted on 300 acres of this nearly 1,000 acre area. The rest, so the 300 acres dedicated to sustainable forestry, and the rest is left as basically watershed protection. We have two great big watersheds on this land as well. So over the last 22 years I've been here, we've been carrying out research work into how did those 40,000 trees do. Actually, they've done pretty well. And biodiversity studies show that biodiversity has also increased in areas where we have planted hardwood trees. Many different studies have been carried out here over the last 15 or so years. One of the things that I'm carrying on with right now is the surveying of critically endangered endemic tree species. I'm keeping nurseries here right now. I have some funding from the Botanical Gardens Conservation International, who are helping us with nursery keeping of nurseries and the propagation of these rare plants. And the other work that we're doing is the awareness of wood. And it seems really ridiculous, but people don't seem to know that wood grows on trees. So part of this project's vision is also to increase people's knowledge that wood is really valuable here in the United States. Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States. It's a great consumer of wood. We found after the hurricane in 2017, Puerto Rico sustained huge tree damage from Hurricane Maria. Category 4 winds just blew right across the island. The hurricane sat over the island for about 12 hours in total, and there was catastrophic tree damage. But it also meant that there was a huge opportunity to use the wood, which was greatly impeded by the government. And I think this is what we call colonial intervention. The wood was not used in the main. We have set up a wood salvage operation. We've got a wood business going on. But there's a lot of gray areas in Puerto Rico about wood and forest resources. So, I mean, I'm not going to go on and on about that, but I just feel that secondary rainforest resource exists here in Puerto Rico and could be used much better. And we really need help here in this era. At this project, we have just suffered after the damage of Hurricane Maria, which left huge holes in the ground where giant trees had fallen. And now with the enormous water event that we had with Hurricane Fiona, we are now by default going to have to move into landscape restoration and eco-regeneration of this area with major landslides. So I appreciate all of the everybody on this forum that I'm meeting and seeing, and I look forward to having communications with people about how to bring people to Puerto Rico to help with this next stage, which is a huge effort. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, 3T. I'll just say this, that it's very interesting because Puerto Rico is one of those countries that's technically US, but is never supported as a US country. It's just not. It's sort of its own island, literally, where it technically is sort of this colonized, territory of the US, but it gets very little of the US supporter resources. So it's just a very fascinating, particularly interesting sort of political social region. And I've been hearing about the work you're doing to sort of create bounty in place and find these ways that are sort of holistic systems for creating abundance from the land and dealing with where sort of crises creates opportunity. And you guys your model has been so wonderful at showing how you can take crises and turn that, take devastation and turn that into into actually like viable, economic, gain and beauty making in the region and, vitality on your lands. And I just really respect your work. So if you would please put in the chat, because I know you weren't sharing your presentation as much today, but sharing about your work, definitely in chat, put the project link so people can look at the beautiful work that you've been doing. And thank you so much for joining us for today. We do have two more projects. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's really, especially hearing you've been at it for 35 years with these guys. I don't know that I had that time mark, but I think as a 45-year-old who feels like a bridger between this sort of younger generation and my mentors, I just respect how much so many people's lives work have poured into, and how we're still here. Like it's this intergenerational continuum of symbiotic relationships. And I just appreciate those who've been doing this for so long, that paved the way for the young generation of activists and restorationists to come through and have something to be hopeful for and look at and learn from. And I know I've learned so much from everybody at Institute of Ecotechnics. So thank you, 3T. With that, I'm going to hand that over to Cindy Tolle from the Evergreen Ranching, and a little different perspective about restoration, integrating cattle and other acts of conservation. And then we'll wrap the day with Kyle Hentz from Many Rivers, One Ocean. But Cindy, thanks so much for being patient. You've been here for a while today. We look forward to hearing from you.
Oh, sure. Okay, I gave a talk yesterday, but for those of you that didn't get to catch that, I'm Cindy Tolle with Evergreen Ranching and Livestock. I'm a conservation rancher and an ecologist, and I collaborate with several of the players you've heard from in the last couple of days, Bob Berkebile and Mark Beam from Heartland P5, and Jacob Canyon and Dan Kroll from Regen Partners. And I'm kind of the regenerative cattle and multi-species piece of the equation, and also the market, bringing specialty foods and all types of good, clean foods to our customers. So anyway, we work in these areas, and today I want to talk about our restoration projects, and particularly in the area down in southeastern Arizona in the green sector, because we started doing grassland restoration in this area in 1995. And I figured if we could restore grasslands in the desert, we could pretty much do it anywhere. So one of the things that really inspired our work is habitat loss for wildlife, particularly grassland birds. And this is kind of what we've been using as our indicator species of our successes over the last couple of decades. And so far we're actually winning. Okay, so the main restoration techniques that we use on our ranch lands, and for those of you that are not aware of this, in the United States anyway, 95% of the grassland bird populations reside on private ranches and protected areas. So it's pretty important that the ranchers take good care of their lands. And this is one of the things we do, is we do workshops and all types of things on restoration to keep your lands in good health. So one of the things we do is water retention, building of check dams and gabions, just to slow the water down and actually percolate back into the earth. This is not new to any of you guys. But one project I want to highlight, and I don't have time to show the video, but I'm going to put this in the chat, this link. But this is a really awesome video. I'm going to just skip a couple of highlights. And this is a project that I am a scientific advisor on, that's basically regreening the desert in southeastern Arizona, taking
the
two
Chiricahua Mountains are a land of history, wilderness, and wonder in southeastern
kind of wasted
Arizona.
landscapes. Let me
Showing
just kind of
evidence is
go
true.
ahead.
Scientists for decades.
Because there was no metrics and there was no scientific quantification that described the mechanisms that were happening in the hydrology here. And that made me really excited about creating an experimental laboratory.
The extraordinary thing about this watershed is the sheer number of rock detention structures.
Okay, so this woman, Valera Austin, I worked with Valera for a couple of years and learned this technique, and it's a technique that people use all over the world. But the thing is that's really impactful is she's doing this right in the Chiricahua Monument, or Chiricahua Mountains of southeastern Arizona, and in the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts where there's no grass. So over the period of time, she's managed to restore the landscape and bring, basically regreen the entire, I mean, she had no grass, she had no water, and she has free flowing streams year round and ample grass. It's a really cool project. But I'm going to leave this link in the chat box, and I'm going to move on because we don't have time.
Creek.
If
where there are no
I can actually back out of this. Let me see if I can back out. I might not be able to. How do I do back out of this? That's Powell Gardens. Shoot. I don't want to go there. Sorry, guys. I'm a rancher. I'm not a technological person. Let me get back to my deal. Okay. All right. So anyway, that project is pretty interesting. Another project that is also as interesting is the second thing we do to restore grasslands is actually do some regenerative grazing. And again, this is a great link. It's very short and it's impactful. So I think we'll have time to watch it. And then that's pretty much it for me. It's a couple minutes, but it's a really cool project, taking that landscape.
Chihuahuan Desert, the largest desert of North America. Once lush grasslands supporting bison, antelope, sheep, golden eagle, and prairie dogs. Nowadays unproductive, eroded, lifeless land. There is no water on site. There is no life on site. There is no hope on site. But there is something going on right in the middle of the desert. A few determined to green the desert to a large scale. Yes, they are the heroes of yesterday, the vaqueros or cowboys, once legendary for taming the wild. Nowadays are best allies to get things back on track. They are working in sync with Mother Nature, moving cattle every day using fences and water points, mimicking the migratory patterns of bison decades ago. As cattle moves, they fertilize and work the soil so life can come back once rain hits the ground. This transformation is already there, even if there are islands of grass across on the vast Chihuahuan Desert. We can replicate these successful experiences. We can fix the water cycle. We can cool this arid environment. We can create habitat for wildlife. We can keep people on the land. We are in. We are cool. We are ranchers willing to tackle desertification.
Yeah, so that's a pretty neat project. And those guys there's a whole consortium of us working on this project, but it's really gotten huge, especially northern Mexico and southeastern Arizona. So we've been able to, as you saw, in just a couple of seasons, put grass and really good biodiversity back on the land just from grazing. So anyway, that's
I appreciate that. We're ranchers. We're cool. Like, I appreciate also the cheekiness of like doing this work. It's very burly work sometimes, but it's also incredibly rich. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's really important, because 95% of these habitats are on ranch lands. All right, thanks, everyone.
Yeah, Cindy, thank you so much for your share about that. And we're going to offer this chance for Kyle Hentz with Many Rivers, One Ocean to take us out. We're going to go just a couple minutes over on this to make sure to wrap in good time. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the other room to start so that we're holding space for the next session, which is on the role of water, soil, and vegetation in cooling the planet. But Katie is going to hold the room down here and help close the session. But Kyle, please go ahead and have your share time as well. Thank you everybody so much who presented today. It's just been incredible. Thank you, Kyle. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jamaica, and thank you, Katie. Both Katie and Jamaica have been gracious enough to invite me to join the Open Impact Forum, and I'm very grateful to them. And Many Rivers, One Ocean is a project in its early stages, and I must admit that I look forward to a day in the not so distant future to have some presentations like the ones I've seen today. The presentations I've seen today about regeneration around the planet, super inspiring. They give me hope. They inspire me practically with Many Rivers, One Ocean, and then with another project that is a much sort of grander global project that I'd like to share briefly. Many Rivers, One Ocean is a project that's based in Costa Rica. It's a 120-mile corridor, what we call a regenerative economic zone that we're looking to create using Web3 tools, platforms, and protocols. But basically linking the fate of the artisan fishermen along the coast, the coral reef, the eco-tourist operations that do whale watching, etc., with the health of the rivers and the streams, where we have in Costa Rica, which is considered an ecological gem, immense amount of industrial fertilizers and pesticides that are being used in the rivers, in the farms along the river. And that all gets washed down into the rivers and then ultimately the ocean. We're starting to see red tides along the coast, Pacific coast of Costa Rica. And we're working with a group called InOceana. It's a marine research and education center based in Ovita, Costa Rica. And we're planning an exploratory expedition in March of next year to bring together the communities along the rivers, 4 rivers, 3 rivers, beginning at the highest, one of the highest mountains in Central America, Chiripo, and then leading down to the Osa Peninsula, which it's an area that probably represents 5 to 6% of the planet's biodiversity, and which the Osa is one of Jacques Cousteau's favorite places. So the idea is to implement protocols along the community. The focus will be on regeneration, reforestation, and also transition to organic. So, and then on the ocean, the coastal side, we'll be doing water testing to identify which pesticides and which fertilizers and so on are impacting ocean life, coastal life. That'll include a mangrove expedition on kayak, and then a boat expedition along the coast out to the Osa and Drake Bay. So that's Many Rivers, One Ocean, and the idea is one of regeneration. I see Many Rivers, One Ocean as part of a larger movement, and I would just want to briefly introduce the Great Regeneration. And I think we're at an epical turning point, and I know we're about to wrap up, but my hope is that all of these projects will be part of building support for an epical transition, and where regeneration becomes business as usual, and it's happening everywhere. And my hope is to identify the 7 regenerative wonders of the world, and basically engage our power to our cultural agency. Together, we have the power to make the changes we need to see and want to see. And that by music and art events, we can generate momentum and funding, channel that funding to the regenerative projects we've heard about today and future projects, and many of the projects hosted on the Open Impact platform. And so my hope is to put some specifics. I'm going to share my screen. And that is a bell ringing event, a global bell ringing event where groups around the world, anyone can organize an event and can cast a bell. We're going to start casting bells, and I've identified 2 regenerative wonders. One is Fresh Kills, and that's in New York, where they brought much of the refuge from the remnants of people who died in the towers. And
are you trying to screen
they,
share? Oh, I think somebody is.
Here I go. Let's see. There. So the Great Regeneration, just briefly, was inspired by John Elkington, who first used the term hashtag on Twitter some years ago, and it would lay sort of dormant, and I've adopted it. And the idea is to cast. This is Fresh Kills. So what's once the largest dump in the world is now become a park, and it's a 30-year plan to transform it into the park that you see on the right. And the idea here is about taking trauma. That could be trauma from environmental impact, like what we saw with the Eden project, and you saw the bullets that were on the what is now desert, where there was once marsh. Those bullets can be cast into a bell, and then a ceremony can be part of a big cultural event. And then at dawn in 2025, which will be the 50th? Wait. Well, it's the 25th anniversary of Live Aid, one of the biggest, most successful conferences, in history. And it's also a similar anniversary for Farm Aid. So our hope is to work towards 2025 and a big dawn bell ringing event. And at dawn around the world, with these bells in regenerative wonders of the world, with musicians playing in these regenerative wonders, basically catalyzing a cultural shift to regeneration. So thank you very much, Katie and Jamaica, for this great opportunity, and onward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kyle. Thank you all for sticking around to hear Kyle's presentation, and to those who just joined for the next session. We'll be starting off in just a moment. And Kyle, if you could just stop the screen share there.
Yes, we'll do.
Thank you.
Gotta get back to.
For those who just joined the Bioregional Roundtable, I'm going to pop it in the chat again. We have 2 sessions after this. The one that will be continuing in this room is on collectively advancing best practices and building knowledge commons. And then for those who want to see the other session on the role of water, soil, and vegetation in cooling the planet, I'm popping the Zoom link in here one more time. And for those of you who have asked about how to best stay in touch with one another, what the opportunities will be to kind of catch up on these presentations, we will be following up with recordings from all of this week's sessions. And you also have all been invited to a group on the Open Impact platform, where you'll be able to participate in discussion with one another, set up profiles, and continue the dialogues. We're already have some follow-up sessions from this week rumbling. And so I'm just going to put that join link in the chat here as well. And if you just click sign up and create a profile, you'll automatically be added to the group. Thank you all so much. I'm going to move things along because we have a really rich session to cover in just an hour up next. So thank you all. I'm going to hit stop on the recording.